The Derbyshires are rallying together to defend their honour, to fend off the rumour that threatens the family in Obsession Cooperative Expansion.
And in this video, we'll be teaching you how to play the Obsession Cooperative mode, which is part of the Characters expansion, designed by Dan Halligan and published by Kayenta Games.
And hello everyone, it's Stella.
And Tarrant from Meeple University.
Alright, let's get to the classroom.
In the cooperative version of Obsession, the Sneyd family has moved to Derbyshire. A crude and unsavoury mob from Staffordshire, they nonetheless have the contacts and resources to compete for the Fairchilds. Through the game, they will quickly build up their estates, build their reputation, and invite the best prestige guests to build up their points. So now it's up to the players to band together to deprive the Sneyds of what they need and to ultimately save Derbyshire society. The Obsession Cooperative mode is designed to be played with either 2 or 3 players. You must use the base game's 2nd edition rules and the 2 modules from the Characters expansion, those being the characters and the distinguished family members. You can play with the Wessex expansion. By default, the game is balanced to be played using the upstairs-downstairs supplemental service, and so that's the version that I'll explain first in the video. If you don't have or don't wish to play with those, that's fine. You'll just need to make a few alterations to rebalance the game, and I'll explain those at the end of the video. You cannot use the upstairs-downstairs milestones, and should exclude all promotional cards and tiles except for those who serve as exiles for the eccentric dowager, and for these 2 tiles, Business Room and Pony and Trap. If you need to learn or need a refresher for any of these previous releases, the links to our 3 prior Obsession How to Play videos are in the video description below. In the game, the team will be competing against the Sneyd family. And for setup purposes, the Sneyds do not count as a family. That means if you're playing 2 players versus the Sneyds, set up as you would for a 2-player game. Each player should have 2 distinguished family members in a 2-player game or 1 in a 3-player game, and may distribute the choices as they see fit. And players choose their starter guests from a pool with twice as many guests in it as players, plus 2. Unchosen starters are shuffled back into the casual deck. When setting up the monuments, use the high-value monuments from the original game, not the low-value ones from upstairs downstairs, and use 1 additional monument, so number of players plus 2 instead of plus 1. Find these 2 service tiles, the Servants' Hall and the Pony and Trap. These tiles offer specific cooperative benefits, and each should be distributed to a different player during setup. Before setting up the objectives pile and discard pile as you would during characters, first remove the 4 objectives showing the ravens. For the 2 labelled Fiery Sermon, add them to the Reverend Grantley's pile, making his pile 6 instead of 4. The other 2 will go to the Sneyd family. When the players get their objectives, they can be displayed face up, and during setup only, players have the chance to freely exchange them between each other, as long as all players finish with 5. As the final change for standard setup, you'll need to create a discard pile for the casual guests. Reveal cards from this deck until you find an unsavoury guest, and place that to start the discard pile, before shuffling the rest back into the deck. Throughout the game, anytime you dismiss a casual guest, or screen multiple casual guests and keep only some, the dismissed or unkept guests are placed on top of this pile. You'll be trying to get the Sneyd family to take these cards to lose them points, so manipulating this is going to be part of the game. There is no such pile for prestige guests. Any of these discarded go back on the bottom of the deck as usual. Now set up the Sneyd family's area. With the Sneyd board, you'll begin with a reputation of 1-4, as well as £1,000, 1 of each basic servant, plus a second chance lady's maid and footman, all of which come from the box and not the counted out supplies. Sneyd starts with 1 of each basic room, plus a business room and servants' hall, all flipped to their higher scoring sides. The business room begins with £200 on it, and you should put the second chance footman on the servants' hall. Place the 3 red scandal markers on these spaces. Beside the board you'll have those 2 objectives, the D6 and D20, and the 5 Sneyd guest cards, all of which show the raven icon. These are laid out in 3 places. The Oliver Sneyd card is simply placed face up. He's the heir who will be trying to court Elizabeth Fairchild through the game. The other 2 family cards, which show the raven in the top corner, are placed in any order face down into an area called the Sneyd's discard pile. And the other 2, who have the raven below the corner, are placed face up in a row called the prestige row. The Sneyds will add more prestige guests to this row throughout the game, and the row should always be organised from lowest prestige to highest. You're now ready to play. In the game, the players are aiming to earn more points than the Sneyds, who will be accumulating points through the game primarily by increasing reputation, gaining improvement tiles, and resolving the benefits on prestige guests from their row. The players need to work carefully to improve their own estates while blocking the Sneyds from getting the most valuable things. At the end of the game, players will score as a team. Similar to the earlier team variants in competitive play, this will be made up from the players' average scores, but critically only the best scoring objectives and only the worst scoring reputation, meaning all players need to work on their reputations. The game plays over rounds, seasons and courtships as usual, and rounds are played using standard turn order rules including the Sneyds as a player. So here round 1 would be Cavendish, Ponsonby, Sneyd. After the marker rotates it will be Sneyd, Cavendish, Ponsonby and so on. In other words, sometimes you'll get to act before the Sneyds, sometimes you won't. First we'll look at how the Sneyds take turns. On a turn you'll resolve these 7 steps in order. First is round track. This means that if there's a village fair, the Sneyds resolve their private study which begins the game flipped. Gain 2 reputation, following the normal rules, as well as £300 added to the money supply. If it's a builder's holiday then just take note as this resolves later in the round, and Sneyd ignores all other standard round effects. Second is business room, for which you simply add £200 to the business room tile. You never resolve the second part of this, the business room simply accumulates money from start to end of the game, with that money ultimately being converted to victory points. Step 3 is monument, in which the Sneyds gain all of their monument benefits, always prioritising reputation when given the choice. And step 4 is Servants' Hall, in which the Sneyds resolve the Servants' Hall effect, stealing a reputation from one of the other players. When stealing or otherwise forcing one of the players to lose reputation, always first prioritise a player who would drop by a full reputation category as a result of the loss. If none exist, target the highest reputation. The 5th step is Enjoy Guest Favours, and this is where you'll activate the Sneyd's Prestige Guest line. There are various effects which will add guests to this line, but it's only during this phase that you'll resolve them for their favours. This happens automatically without the need to host an activity tile, but only if reputation is high enough. So, go from left to right across this row, gaining the favours on the cards until you've either resolved 3 total cards or have none left that meet the reputation requirement. When you do resolve a card, ignore the service, gain the favours, here for example it's gaining money, before moving the card face down to the discard pile. Once it's there, its favours are never resolved again, it's simply retained for its victory points. When the favour involves gaining or spending money, this is always done from the Sneyd's money supply, never from the money on the business room tile. If short, Sneyd always spends reputation to make up the difference, and if still short, the penalty is ignored. Reputation favours are gained or lost using the normal rules. And if you'd go above max, always cash in for money before gaining. If inviting a prestige guest, draw the top one from the deck and add it to its appropriate space in the prestige row. If multiple guests are tied, new guests go to the right of old guests. There may be at most 5 cards in the prestige row, which you check after fully resolving the effect which made it drawn. That means here I would temporarily gain a 6th while I resolve this card, but would be legally back down to 5 after discarding. If an effect ever results in drawing a 6th, then the new one is simply placed face down on the discard pile without revealing or resolving the favours. It will only be worth its victory points. When the favour is to gain a casual guest, Sneyd takes the top card from the casual guest discard pile if available, or the top card from the deck if not, and puts it straight into the discard pile, again ignoring favours. It's in your interest to have Sneyd add as many negative point scoring cards as you can through this method. The Sneyds never screen guests. You would simply treat this as draw 1 casual guest rather than draw 2, keep 1. And finally, if a favour allows for a victory point card, simply draw 1 and place it unseen into the scoring pile. This will be revealed for its victory points at the end of the game, and the secondary effects are never resolved. The Sneyds completely ignore all types of favour other than those I just listed. Step 6 is acquire from market. Sneyd will gain 1 or possibly more improvement tiles from the market, based on the roll of a d20 and without ever having to pay money, adding those tiles automatically to their estate. On a roll of 13 to 19, you'll take the tile in the appropriately costed space. On 11 or 12, Sneyd will build both the 300 and 400 pound tiles. On a roll from 1 to 10, Sneyd will take the value tile, and on a 20, we'll completely refresh the market, then take the value tile. For value, take the highest priced tile which meets one of these categories, checking the categories in this order. That means first take a tile matching this season's Courtship card, if not, then a monument, before progressing through the basic types of Prestige, Estate, Sporting, Essentials and Service. Include tiles from the Builder's Reserve when making this check. If this were an Estate season, then this would be the value tile. In the Builder's Holiday round, in addition to the tile from the D20, also take the tile with the highest sorting number from both of the 2 reserves. For any tile gained, immediately gain the benefits printed on the unupgraded side, so here 3 reputation, flip it over and then place it in the estate. That way Sneyd always gets the unupgraded benefit and the upgraded victory points. For a hybrid tile, gain the benefits on the underlined side and place it on the other. Benefits follow the same rules as guest favours. For example, this would simply be taking 2 casual guests, and benefits other than the standard ones already described are ignored, with one exception. Gaining a butler's pantry gains the Sneyds an under-butler. The Sneyds never use their servants. They simply collect them for the 2 victory points apiece, and the players can recruit them away using the normal rules. Like the players, the Sneyds are not allowed to have duplicate tiles, and if the Sneyds draw a duplicate tile, it's simply discarded with no further effect. A good bonus for the players. The final step is the Impropriety effect, and here you'll roll the d6 and resolve an effect which is negative for the Sneyds. On a 1 or a 2, the Sneyds gain another casual guest in the usual way. On a 3, they lose 1 reputation. On a 4 or 5, they lose £200, and on a 6, you get to place one of the 3 scandal tokens onto an empty scandal space. This will cost them 3 reputation, or £500, or allow you to gain a fiery sermon. Choose a player to take one from Reverend Grantley's pile, and on a future Sneyd turn, after the d20's been rolled, you can play the sermon to protect an improvement tile. This prevents Sneyd from getting that specific tile on this turn, although it doesn't stop Sneyd from taking a tile entirely, and you may need to re-roll the die to get a valid number. If you protected either the 300 or 400 pound card and Sneyd rolled an 11 or 12, Sneyd will re-roll. Once Sneyd's turn is over, played fiery sermons are returned to Grantley's pile. Scandals remain in place, so the first 3 6s rolled must all be for different effects. If a 4th 6 is ever rolled, then these tokens all come off, freeing you up to choose any one again for the 5th 6 rolled. Once you've finished with Impropriety, the Sneyd's turn is over. The Sneyds are competing with the players for the Courtship, and so if the Sneyds have the most points worth of the current theme, then Elizabeth Fairchild will join them for the next season. For the first 3 courtships, this triggers all 3 favours on both Oliver and Elizabeth, while for the final courtship you can add her to the discard pile. You won't score her favours but will score her points. As for the players, the Sneyds will gain a victory point card as well for winning or tying on the courtship. After each courtship round, completely refresh the builder's market. At the end of the game, the Sneyds score as any normal player would. So, points on tiles, 2 points per servant excluding the second chances, points for reputation, points on victory point cards, 1 point per 200 pounds both in supply and on the business room, points for the 2 standard starting objectives. This will always be an extra 3 points per monument, and 9 points if Sneyd has the most building tiles. And finally, the points printed on all gentry cards, including both the discard pile and the prestige row. So what options do you, the players, have to deal with the Sneyd juggernaut? Well, we've seen a few so far. You can use the fiery sermons, which you get from the Impropriety step, to stop Sneyd from getting critical buildings before you've had the chance to take them. If you invite Reverend Grantley, then you can use his effect to gain a fiery sermon instead of exchanging objectives if you wish. You still need to pay Grantley's £100 to take this card. We've also seen that you want to get as many negative points scoring guests into Sneyd's pile as you can by getting them on top of this discard pile using dismissal and screening effects. It may happen that positive scoring cards end up on top of this pile. And to deal with this, any time an effect allows you to reduce the opponent's reputation, you may instead rearrange this entire pile to the order of your choosing. If you want, you can choose to resolve Servants' Hall in Step 6 rather than Step 2 of your turn. There is a slight change to the start of the order of play. Instead of each player rotating service at the beginning of their own turn, now all of the players will rotate service simultaneously at the beginning of a new round. This is because there are now 3 special cooperative actions which you can directly use to help your teammates. The first is that you can share servants. You can always borrow any number of servants from your teammates' available service. Just make sure to lie them down or tap them sideways to distinguish your own from your teammates, since at the end of your turn, it will return to your teammates' expended service. When hosting an activity, you're allowed to invite any number of family or starter casual guests from your teammates' hands. Again, tap them sideways to keep track of whose is whose, since after the activity this will return to your teammate's discard pile. You can also share a little bit of money. Teammates may give each other money on the recipient's turn, up to a total of £200 received per turn. You are allowed to take special actions outside your turn in order to have the money or servants to share, while there are a few restrictions on these actions. Specifically, you can borrow a teammate's butler, but not for the purposes of taking an action involving hiring servants. When you borrow a servant, it does not get to use any of the passive abilities in the estate it's visiting, but it may still use passive abilities from its owner's estate. And you can borrow a teammate's supplemental servant, which may allow you to use multiple supplemental servants on the same turn. Something you normally can't do because you can normally only have one servant per type. However, when you do this, each servant must be on a different tile or card. That means you still can't use 2 cooks on the same turn, since they are always placed on the tile. Constable Bucket's effect is a little bit stronger in the cooperative mode. Now, on the turn he's in play, you don't just ignore negative favours, you also ignore any reputation loss for using a second chance servant. Finally, one player begins the game with the pony and trap tile, a tile which allows you to use another player's activity tile on your turn. Once this has been upgraded to the handsome cab, this can be done with a further benefit. Once the game is over, determine the player's scores according to what are the standard team mode rules. For improvement tiles, gentry, service, money, and victory points, the team will score the average among all players for that category, rounded down. For objectives, collectively score the team's 3 single highest scoring objectives. So really try to work cooperatively on contriving the highest scoring ones to your benefit. You don't have to beat Sneyd to win a majority bonus objective. You can win these against one of your teammates. Finally, score reputation points based on the least reputable player. Beat the Sneyd family score and you win the game. The cooperative game is intended to be challenging, and it has been balanced using the upstairs-downstairs expansion. If you don't have or aren't using that expansion, then it becomes even more challenging. So to balance that out, you'll make the following changes shown on page 5 of the rulebook. This means starting with more of your distinguished family members, starting the game with the 2 fiery sermons, and gaining an improved family bonus. You can choose to make all of these adjustments with upstairs-downstairs if you want an easier game. You can also play the extended 20-round version of the game with a couple of changes. Firstly, the team doesn't start the game with a servants' hall and pony and trap. Instead, they begin the game in the service reserve and have to be purchased. Secondly, prior to setup, set aside Major Anthony Cole and the Lionheart Suite. After the game's second courtship, Sneyd takes both of them and immediately resolves them by gaining double Cole's favours, so that's 6 reputation, adding Cole to the discard pile, and flipping the suite to its monument side to enjoy for the rest of the game. And that's how to play the Obsession Cooperative Expansion.
Thanks so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, let me know and share this video if you enjoyed. And hopefully you have a great day. See you next time.